Suspiciously purchased gas. In the quiet, unassuming town of Springfield, nestled in the heart of Ohio, there was a convenience store that stood as a beacon of normalcy amidst the serenity of suburban life. It was the kind of place where the regular customers knew each other by name, and the daily routine of buying groceries and snacks took on a comforting rhythm. But one fateful day, an innocuous purchase of a gallon of gas would lead to a chain of events that would unravel the town's peace and plunge it into a web of mystery and intrigue. Behind the counter of the convenience store stood Sarah, a woman in her early 40s who had spent the better part of her life serving the townsfolk with a friendly smile and a welcoming demeanor. Her days were filled with the hum of the cash register, the chime of the doorbell as customers entered, and the cheerful banter of familiar faces. On a crisp autumn afternoon, as the leaves outside turned shades of red and gold, a customer entered the store. He was a man in his mid-30s, his features unremarkable at first glance. He approached the counter with a gallon container in hand and a sense of urgency in his demeanor. With a polite nod, the man placed the gallon container on the counter and spoke in a hushed tone. "I need a gallon of gas, please." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. It was unusual for someone to purchase such a small quantity of gas, especially without a vehicle nearby. But she thought nothing more of it and proceeded to fill the container. As she worked, she couldn't help but steal a few glances at the man. He appeared nervous, his eyes darting around the store as though expecting someone to burst through the door at any moment. It was an odd behavior that left Sarah with a nagging sense of unease. Once the container was filled, the man paid in cash and hastily made his exit, leaving Sarah with a lingering feeling of discomfort. She watched as he climbed into an old, beat-up sedan parked a short distance away and sped off, leaving a trail of questions in his wake. Days passed, and Sarah went about her routine, serving customers and engaging in friendly conversations. But the memory of the man who had purchased the gallon of gas continued to nag at her. It was as though a shadow had been cast over the tranquility of the town. Then, one fateful evening, Sarah's worst fears were realized. She turned on the local news to witness a horrifying sight. A house in the nearby neighborhood was engulfed in flames, the inferno consuming everything in its path. The news anchor reported that the fire had claimed the lives of several people and left a trail of devastation in its wake. Sarah's heart sank as she realized the connection between the man and the gallon of gas he had purchased from her store. It was a chilling revelation, one that sent shivers down her spine. She knew she had to act, to do whatever it took to help the authorities find the man who had set the fire. She immediately contacted the local detectives and provided them with an accurate description of the man and his vehicle. Her detailed account would prove invaluable in the investigation that followed. Weeks turned into months, and the town of Springfield was gripped by a sense of fear and uncertainty. But the authorities, armed with Sarah's information, worked tirelessly to track down the man who had set the devastating fire. Their efforts would eventually lead to his capture, and he would face the consequences of his actions. The man was convicted and sentenced to prison, where he would spend the next 30 years paying for the lives he had taken and the havoc he had wreaked. As the years passed, the town of Springfield slowly healed from the scars of that fateful day. Sarah returned to her role at the convenience store, her dedication to her community unwavering. The memory of the man and the gallon of gas had faded into the past, a haunting reminder of the darkness that could lurk in the most unexpected places. And as the sun set over the quiet town of Springfield, life continued to move forward, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of individuals like Sarah, who, in their own small ways, could make a difference in the face of darkness. Someone hiding in the bathroom. In the heart of a remote town in the United States, nestled between rolling hills and surrounded by dense forests, there stood a gas station that served as the lifeblood of the community. For years, this gas station had been a haven for the weary travelers passing through, as well as a gathering place for the town's residents. One particularly quiet night, a young woman named Emily settled into her usual spot behind the counter. It was the graveyard shift, and the clock had just struck 7 p.m. Her coworker had left shortly after she had started, leaving her alone in the dimly lit store. Emily had worked at the gas station for many years and had grown accustomed to the solitude of the night shift. It was a time when the world seemed to slow down, and the stillness of the night enveloped her. She often took advantage of the quiet hours to catch up on her reading or simply sit in contemplation. As the hours passed, Emily's eyelids began to droop, and the monotony of the night threatened to lull her into a deep slumber. The store's fluorescent lights cast an eerie glow over the empty aisles, and the hum of the refrigerators provided a soothing backdrop. But just as Emily was about to succumb to the drowsiness that had overtaken her, the tranquility of the night was shattered by a sudden and unexpected commotion. From the corner of her eye, she caught a flash of movement, and her heart skipped a beat. A figure, wild-eyed and disheveled, burst out of the customer washroom with a frenzied urgency. Sweat dripped from his brow, and his chest heaved as though he had been running for his life. He stumbled forward, crashing into a display of snacks before steadying himself. Emily's eyes widened in shock as she took in the sight of the disoriented man before her. She had been alone in the store for hours, and no customers had come through the doors during her shift. The sudden appearance of this stranger left her baffled and alarmed. For a moment, Emily and the man locked eyes, their gazes filled with a mixture of fear and confusion. Time seemed to stand still as they assessed each other, neither quite sure how to proceed. Then, with a surge of adrenaline, the man bolted toward the exit, his footsteps echoing loudly in the otherwise silent store. The door swung open with a jingle, and he disappeared into the night, leaving behind a trail of questions and bewilderment. Emily was left stunned, her heart racing, and her mind filled with a whirlwind of thoughts. How had the man ended up in the customer washroom without her noticing? She had been at the counter for hours, and no one had entered the store during that time. It was as though he had materialized out of thin air. The eerie encounter left Emily with an unsettling feeling that lingered long after the man's hasty departure. She couldn't shake the sense that something inexplicable had occurred that night, something beyond the realm of understanding. As the hours ticked by, Emily continued to work her shift, her mind consumed by the mystery of the man who had seemingly emerged from nowhere. The gas station, once a place of solitude and routine, had become a source of intrigue and uncertainty. And as the first light of dawn broke over the town, Emily knew that some secrets were destined to remain hidden, leaving her with a sense of unease and the unsettling belief that the night held mysteries that defied explanation. Lifesaving Dream. In the heart of a bustling city in the United States, there stood a small convenience store, an unassuming beacon of light amidst the chaos of the urban landscape. The store had its share of late-night patrons and weary travelers seeking solace in the glow of its fluorescent lights and the promise of a warm meal. For Emily, a young woman in her 20s, the convenience store had become a familiar second home. Emily had recently taken on the role of the night shift cashier, a position that required her to work alone through the quiet, often eerie hours of the night. Her coworkers had warned her about the challenges of the late shift, the solitude, and the occasional odd encounter with nocturnal visitors. Still, she had embraced the job with the hope of earning some extra income while navigating the demands of college life. As Emily settled into her new routine, she quickly adapted to the quiet of the night, finding solace in the rhythm of her tasks. The hum of the refrigerators and the occasional chime of the doorbell provided a soothing backdrop to her nightly duties. However, as time passed, she couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that crept over her during the late hours. One night, while Emily was stocking the shelves with snacks and beverages, she overheard a conversation between her coworkers in the break room. They spoke in hushed tones, discussing the recent riots that had erupted in a nearby neighborhood. The news was filled with reports of unrest and chaos, leaving the city on edge. As Emily listened to the grim accounts of the riots, a sense of unease settled over her. She couldn't help but wonder if the turbulence in the nearby area would spill over into her peaceful corner of the city. She brushed off the thought as irrational and continued with her work, determined not to let fear dictate her actions. But as the days passed and the tension in the city mounted, Emily's apprehension grew. The late-night shifts had begun to take a toll on her, leaving her exhausted and vulnerable to the lingering sense of dread that plagued her thoughts. Then, one fateful night, Emily experienced a dream so vivid and unsettling that it would change the course of her life. In her dream, she found herself behind the convenience store's counter, going about her duties just as she did every night. But as the minutes ticked by, a shadowy figure entered the store, concealed by a hoodie and a mask. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as the figure approached the counter, a glint of menace in their eyes. With a trembling voice, they demanded money from the cash register, a gun concealed beneath their clothing. Fear coursed through Emily's veins as she complied with their demands, her hand shaking as she handed over the money. The dream felt agonizingly real, each moment etched into her memory with a terrifying clarity. But just as the figure made their exit, they turned to Emily and issued a chilling threat. "Don't you dare call the police," they hissed, their voice a sinister whisper. Emily awoke in a cold sweat, her heart racing, and her mind consumed by the haunting vision of the dream. It had felt so real, so vivid, that she couldn't shake the feeling that it was a premonition of the danger that awaited her on the night shift. Determined to heed the warning of her dream, Emily approached her manager the next day, her voice trembling as she recounted the unsettling vision. She requested to be taken off the night shift, explaining her fear of a potential robbery or violence. Her manager, understanding the gravity of the situation, agreed to her request and reassigned her to daytime shifts. Emily felt a profound sense of relief, grateful for the opportunity to escape the late-night shifts that had weighed on her like a heavy burden. 2 weeks passed, and Emily settled into her new routine, free from the anxiety and dread that had plagued her on the night shift. She couldn't help but wonder if her dream had been a mere product of her imagination, a manifestation of her fears and anxieties. Then, one fateful night, Emily received a call from her former coworkers. The convenience store had been robbed, just as she had dreamed. A masked figure had entered the store, demanded money at gunpoint, and made a hasty exit, leaving the staff shaken and terrified. As Emily listened to the details of the robbery, she couldn't help but feel a shiver of gratitude for the dream that had saved her from a potentially life-threatening situation. She had followed her instincts, heeded the warning of her subconscious, and escaped the danger that had befallen her former colleagues. The events of that night left Emily with a profound sense of awe and wonder at the mysteries of the human mind. Her dream had been a life-saving premonition, a beacon of light in the darkness of uncertainty. She couldn't explain the source of her vision, but she knew that it had spared her from a fate that could have been far more sinister. And as Emily continued her journey through life, she carried with her the knowledge that sometimes the most inexplicable and unsettling experiences could be the ones that ultimately saved us from harm, guiding us through the darkest of nights and into the safety of the dawn. Climbing into the coolers. In the heart of a bustling city in the United States, there was a convenience store unlike any other. Located on a corner known for its late-night traffic and eclectic mix of patrons, this store had seen its fair share of odd encounters and bizarre incidents over the years. But one particular night would forever stand out in the memories of those who witnessed it. The store was a small, dimly lit oasis amidst the cacophony of the city's streets. Its fluorescent lights cast an eerie glow on the rows of snacks, beverages, and refrigerators lining the narrow aisles. It was a place where the late-night wanderers sought refuge, their reasons as varied as the products on the shelves. Behind the counter stood Lisa, a young woman with a penchant for observing the peculiarities of life that unfolded within the store's walls. Lisa had worked at the convenience store for several years, and she had become something of an unofficial chronicler of the odd and unexpected moments that occurred during the late-night shifts. On one unassuming night, as the clock struck midnight, Lisa settled into her routine behind the counter. The store was alive with activity as a steady stream of customers flowed in and out, their footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. The cash register hummed with the sound of transactions, and the doorbell chimed with each new arrival. As the night wore on, Lisa couldn't help but notice a man who stood out from the rest. He was a tall figure, his features obscured by a hooded sweatshirt and a pair of dark sunglasses, despite the late hour. His behavior, however, was what set him apart from the other patrons. The man wandered through the store with an air of aimlessness, his eyes darting around as though he were searching for something. He moved from aisle to aisle, his footsteps tentative and hesitant. Lisa watched him from behind the counter, her curiosity piqued by his unusual demeanor. But it was what happened next that would leave an indelible mark on Lisa's memory. As the man approached the refrigerators at the back of the store, he came to a sudden halt. Without warning, he opened the glass door of one of the coolers, revealing rows of chilled beverages and sodas. What happened next defied all logic and reason. The man, in a bizarre and bewildering act, attempted to climb into the cooler. He squeezed his body through the narrow opening, contorting himself in a futile attempt to fit into the shelves of soda. It was a surreal sight, as though he were trying to disappear into the cold confines of the cooler. Lisa's eyes widened in disbelief as she watched the man's absurd efforts. She couldn't comprehend the motive behind his actions, and the other customers in the store stood frozen, their gazes locked on the spectacle unfolding before them. As the man struggled to fit into the cooler, his limbs flailing in all directions, Lisa took action. She rushed forward, her voice stern but tinged with concern. "Sir, you can't do that. Get out of there," she exclaimed, her words echoing through the store. With a final, futile attempt, the man withdrew from the cooler, his clothing damp from the chilled beverages that surrounded him. He staggered backward, his sunglasses askew and his hood falling back to reveal a disheveled appearance. Lisa, her patience wearing thin, demanded an explanation for his inexplicable behavior. But the man remained silent, his eyes locked onto some distant point as though he were in a trance. It was as if he had been pulled into a world of his own, a realm of confusion and bewilderment. Unable to make sense of the situation, Lisa called the police, who arrived shortly thereafter to assess the man's condition. It was clear that something had driven him to such an unusual and irrational act, but the answers remained elusive. As the police questioned the man and conducted their investigation, the store slowly returned to its usual state of quietude. The other customers resumed their shopping, and the late-night shift carried on, though the memory of the man who had tried to climb into the coolers would linger in their minds for years to come. In the end, the incident remained a mystery, an inexplicable anomaly that defied explanation. The man's motives, his state of mind, and the strange compulsion that had led him to attempt such an absurd act would forever remain unanswered questions. And as Lisa resumed her role behind the counter, watching the late-night patrons come and go, she couldn't help but wonder about the depths of the human psyche and the enigmatic nature of the human experience. The convenience store had once again become a stage for the bizarre and the inexplicable, a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary converged in the most unexpected ways. As the night stretched on, Lisa knew that the store would continue to be a source of strange encounters and peculiar moments, a testament to the enduring mysteries of the human soul and the uncharted territories of the human mind. And as she gazed out at the city beyond the store's windows, she couldn't help but wonder what other secrets and surprises the night had in store for her and the world beyond the coolers.